So last week, Konami revealed the official art of this year's Megatins, which is a big deal because for a lot of people, the Megatins are the best product of the year, or at least they were until last year's Zodiac the Megatin. Now, this is a big deal also because, well, it's finally not Yuki and Kaiba. It's Jaden and Yusei from GX and 5Ds, which is awesome. As many of you know, I really can't stand the overuse of Yuki and Kaiba, and to stick them on 2 Megatins in a row was bullshit. So seeing some other characters in other series get some love is great. Now, I do wish that it was Jaden and Chaz, as I think the individual series themselves need more attention than just occasionally referencing them, but I think this is a great start and a good move in the right direction. But there is one itty-bitty thing that kind of is bothering me, and the more I thought about it, the bigger a deal it became, and that is that in the description of the tins, they describe Jaden as the king of big comebacks, which is, in my opinion, completely wrong. Jaden is not the king of comebacks. If anything, Jaden is probably the king of setup. He is probably the most realistic duelist in the whole franchise, and the protagonist with easily the most consistent, real-world playable deck. Now, yes, as the series goes on, it gets a little more convoluted when Neos got introduced and all that stuff, but for the most part, if for all my problems with GX, which I have many, the way the duels were handled is not one of them. And that's what we're here to talk about today. I'm going to explain why GX has nothing to do with comebacks and why it has everything to do with strategy. First up, I'd like to talk about, I think this is important to establish, where things kind of were when GX showed up. That being that the first one had just ended, it was a huge hit. GX came out, it was not as financially successful. A lot of this was, I think, due to the fact the fad of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was ending, and also the move over to the afternoon Magoozy block on Cartoon Network, I think sort of hurt things as Saturday morning cartoon was still looked at as the prestigious time to watch your animated programming. But the thing is, GX still maintained a fan base, and that fan base seemed to like it because the game was played more accurate. Though we all loved the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Growing up, I think we can all agree it really doesn't follow the rules, decks don't really make a lot of sense, and the more you think about it, it really doesn't work as sort of a back-and-forth gamble type anime. Mother's Basement did a whole video a while back on why this is sort of a problem with both card game animes and other series like, say, Kakagururi, and I'd recommend you check his video out on the subject. But to basically summarize it here, in the original Yu-Gi-Oh!, they didn't really follow the rules, and they didn't really tell you what was at each player's disposal. So therefore, it was really sort of hard to gauge how great they really were. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Used a lot of visual metaphor, big Egyptian gods, big dragons and demons. But if you really wanted to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! And you really wanted to understand the card game and why these people are the best, you really wouldn't get it. Then GX showed up, and GX completely flipped everything on its head. You had this more comedic tone, you had this more, albeit crazier setting with being on an island, but feeling a little bit more grounded, and most importantly, the game was played realistically. When you look at Jaden's first duel, everything you need to know about this character is in his opening hand and how he plays that duel. He searches for cards. He sets up strategies. Flame Wingman only has 2,100 attack points, but the way Jaden uses him is why it's his ace. It doesn't matter that its attack is low. What matters is that he knows how to use it effectively. Watch that first duel. He actually has a pretty good setup for the time. He knows how to get to his ace, and when he beats Crowler, it's insinuated this is his normal strategy. This is what he does. He waits for you to get your big thing out, then he burns you to death with Flame Wingman. This is really smart, and a lot better than, say, the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Episode 1, where the duel is essentially, oh no, I'm gonna lose, I'm drawing into body parts, and then the body parts save my ass. No, this was establishing intelligence, and this was establishing how things work. For the most part, even though, yes, there's a lot of RNG in how you draw Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, usually how your opening hand is set up is what's going to set the pace of the duel, and that opening hand is based on your build. Jaden didn't play random stuff like Magnet Warriors or Chimera the Flying Mythical Beast. No, he played a series of cards that worked in tandem with each other. I remember when I first started seeing the elemental heroes and I started seeing other archetypes. It occurred to me I was a little worried things were going to look a little dull, but the more I watched and the more I could actually follow what was going on and understanding the logic in the duels, the more I can get into it. Part of the reason I love elemental heroes is because watching them in GX was the first time I felt like I could play at this level because I felt like I was being engaged. Jaden had constant strategies. He had constant ways of going into the right cards and setting up the right strategies. And this was throughout everybody. Every duelist in this show played a logical deck, one that worked together. Now, yeah, you get Chaz, who had like 5 different engines, but I've always been under the opinion Chaz switched decks all the time, just whatever he was in the mood for. But even then, you saw him play support cards. His cards worked in tandem with each other, and the decks made sense. That is something that I sort of feel maybe kind of gets lost nowadays when you want everything to be big and epic and grand in scale. You saw the same thing with Yusei. Yusei had strategy, but as his deck went on, it kind of got a little more random and unfocused. Weirdly, the more he focused on just summoning Stardust Dragon, it felt like the kind of more all over the place and less strategic his deck became. Yuma was a little bit different because, obviously, as I've said multiple times before, his deck being weak and scattered was a metaphor, and even though I like the idea of what the deck represents for his growth as a character, I still like the way GX did it. Arc 5, obviously, all the random, forgettable performer pals sucked, and Vrains, oh god, the stupid skills. But in a lot of weird ways, even though I think GX is still the weakest Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole, and let me make this clear, I think ultimately GX is just a lot of lacklusterness more than anything else. I don't think it has anything horrendous in it, except for a couple things. I don't think there's anything super bad, and it's still way more interesting than Card Fight Vanguard or Future Card Buddy Fight. But I do feel that in a weird way, GX kind of set this bar that I don't think any of the other Yu-Gi-Ohs have went through, because no other felt like it was interested in taking the time to sort of establish why this deck has a strategy or why it works the way it does. And I kind of wish they'd go back to that. And it kind of feels like by calling Jaden the king of comebacks, they don't acknowledge this. Then I remember that description was probably typed up by a sales representative who is probably overworked, tired, has a problem with getting erections, and his wife wants to leave him for said erection problem, and now I'm just getting weird and I don't know where I'm going with this. But what do you think below? In the comment section, tell me, what do you think of Jaden as a duelist? Do you think the show should adapt some more stuff? You know what? Tell me what you think this new Neos thing does, because they're hyping it up a lot. I doubt it's going to be anything really that good. But tell me that below. And as always, click to like, click subscribe, and tell me if you want to see more sort of abstract Yu-Gi-Oh! Discussions like this.